What is going on, everybody? It is it's not Monday night, believe it or not. It's a Wednesday night, and we are here with Tonight in Haddonfield, a very special episode for each and every one of you tuning in live and tuning in after the fact. Joining me, as always, on this show, it's my partner in crime, Mr. Dean Renner. What's going on, buddy?
What's going on, everyone? Pretty tired after a long day, but very excited to get into quite a few things we talked about already, and dive a little more into these Taking Shape books with Dustin here with us tonight.
Yeah, I forgive the term, but I used to I was talking with Darren on the Slaughtered Lamb podcast years ago when Taking Shape 2 first came out, and he's talking to me about how big the book is. He got his a couple days before mine. He's like, this thing is like a phone book.
Yeah.
And like, I could not wait to get my hands on it. And from that day forward, I have actually referred to both of these books as like must buy material that are more or less like Halloween Bibles of a sort. I think they're the, not to brown nose too much here, but I think they're the best pieces of Halloween literature ever written. And joining us tonight is one of the men behind that. It's Mr. Dustin McNeill. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you guys so much for having me back. This is a new experience for me, getting invited back somewhere. Usually it's one and done and we've had enough of him. So to get a second date, I consider this a big deal.
I considered a second date with my wife a big deal too. I was surprised that happened. So, really excited to get into a lot of Halloween content here. But before we get into anything, what's going on with you? What are you doing these days? Are you working on anything new?
This year, I'm not writing anything for the first time in a long time, but I am publishing 2 books this year by other authors through Harker Press, which is my indie label that I've done Taking Shape through. And those are horror movie books that are wrapping up and being done now. They'll be out in summer and fall, and I can't wait to announce those, but it's too premature to do it right now. But that's it. I released a book a few months ago in October, a book. It's called House of Rejects, The Making of Rob Zombie's Firefly Trilogy. So that's my latest book, which I know is he's a controversial figure around here, Mr. Zombie. But if you happen to enjoy his work, that's a book all about the trilogy that he's best known for.
I don't know if I mentioned this in our last interview. It was a couple years ago now, but I have a guilty pleasure for Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 for all the wrong reasons. I think we're supposed to sit down and watch that movie and feel like it's a horror movie, but I feel like in that movie, Malcolm McDowell specifically just comes off so over the top at times that I find it funny, not in a bad way, but like, hey, this is entertaining in an entirely different way. And then Michael, obviously, in that film, is just a maniac. He's stomping faces in, and yeah.
I get why people really don't like his movies. I understand it, but his first one was okay, his first Halloween, but Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 to me is nightmare perfection. It's its own psycho thing. And so if you come at it as a Halloween film, it's garbage, pure garbage. But if you see it as its own side thing, I love it. And anytime I meet someone else who does, I consider them a kindred spirit, because I think it's right up there with maybe Halloween Ends with the most hated entries in the series, right?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a tough watch for a lot of people, but you make a valid point there that you kind of step away from the Halloween aspect of it and look at it more psychological, and then it kind of works in its own way.
But yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Oh, Sean, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Dean. We have Dustin's work here, and I believe, I hope I'm not falsely advertising this, I think all 5 of them are available on Amazon. I know I checked 4 of them before posting the 5. Is Slash of the Titans available on Amazon as well?
It is. They're all available in paperback, some are in hardcover. They're all available for ebook, and they're also, except for the newest book, they're all available on Audible. Encyclopocalypse Publications, which is the publisher that I team with on this, they're recording House of Rejects right now, so that'll be out soon. If you like extremely long audiobooks, the Taking Shape 2 audiobook was like 22 hours long,
and worth
which is
every minute.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for saying so. They sent me a digital copy of it when it came out to review, and they were like, "Did you listen to it?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. That's a lot of time." But I did sample it. It's really well done, really good. They have great narrators.
Yeah, I on the audiobook front, as someone who drives a lot and drives for a living, and there's times where I can have something on and there's times where I can't have something on. Having an audiobook is so convenient. I was researching, I didn't even know this existed, but there's a Halloween 4 novel that was re-released a few years ago, I believe. And it's like an ultimate edition. Didn't even know it existed. Mm-hmm. So now it's like way up my to-do list. But like, I got 3 kids and I work 2 jobs. So it's like, when am I going to have time to read through a novel? And I thought maybe there'd be an audiobook, and there's not. And then I looked at Tommy Lee Wallace's Halloween 3, Where the Hell is Michael Myers book, which is like way up on my want to get list. It's also not on an audiobook. It seems like in terms of Halloween literature, you're one of few people who have put it out there on the audio format. And like for a lot of us, that's super convenient.
Well, I've got to hand it to like I said, the team at Encyclopocalypse Publications. The one downside to having audiobooks is they have these suave English narrators who read the books, and people listen to that. Then they invite me on their podcast. And when they realize I don't sound like that, it's a disappointment. They think it's me. And it's not.
I just like the convenience of it. I like the option of it. I read Taking Shape 2. I would say front to back, but the truth is when I read Taking Shape 2 when it first came out, I skipped all over the place. I went to the table of contents. I was like, okay, well, which one do I want to read first? And so I did not read it in order. But when I got the audiobook, I listened to it from the beginning all the way to the end and let it play through the course of a few weeks at work. And I have to say, man, it is one of the better done audiobooks I've ever listened to. So that's a great partnership you have going.
Thank you.
Let's get into this. So, to a lot of people's pleasure and to some people's chagrin, I suppose, there's more Halloween coming. And we know for sure there's some coming in the shape of a TV series. That's being done by Miramax, Trancas. We don't know if there's other partners that'll be involved in that. And then Jeff Snyder of the Hot Mic put out a few weeks ago. Again, this is just a rumor, guys. That he thought, and we've covered it since, that it would make more sense if the first new Halloween content we got was a movie that then sprung into a TV show, rather than what the press release hints at, where we'll have the TV show, but they would like a cinematic connected universe. That's their goal here. However they intend to do it, that's what they release to the public. Dean and I have talked on this show at length about how, hey, when you start on the small screen, it is not easy. There's not many success stories of going from the small screen to the big screen, where there are several stories of something starting off on the big screen and then spinning off onto the small screen. The most recent case being the Batman, and now I think Penguin's coming out on Max. So we'll pose the question to you, man. What was your reaction to this? Obviously, there was going to be more Halloween, whether anybody was ready for it or not. But do you think that, it seems like a very ambitious project? Like, they didn't just announce one thing; they implied a cinematic universe. They didn't tell us, who the characters involved would be, or even really the creatives involved. That's under lock and key too. But do you think that it makes more sense to start on the big screen and move to the small screen, or is there an avenue where this thing starts off on TV and can still build up to a cinematic event?
Great question. There's so much to unpack there. Ultimately, all I really have to bring to this, I should preface this by saying, is my opinions, because anything I might have also heard a rumor for is by this point probably so out of date. The behind the scenes situation with Trancas and Miramax, it's so fluid. And if you've read Taking Shape 2, you know that they've always got multiple pitches and ideas and projects under consideration and development. So all I have here is my opinion. But I get nervous anytime I hear a creative group or person mention the words cinematic universe, because, and then I didn't know the Halloween team tried to dial that back some once they dropped those words. But how many cinematic universes have been teed up in movies, in final scenes or post-credit scenes, and it just is if it even comes to fruition, is a complete shit show. Because that seems to have only really worked a couple of times, and when it has worked, it's been because it unfolded organically. And so it gives me huge pause thinking about what they might try to do. I know for me personally, I would love to see a TV show or movie, whatever's next. I would love to see it play more loose with both the timeline and the continuity. We've had some real strict continuity entries from H2O and Resurrection to the new Blumhouse trilogy. You can watch this film, but not this film. And it ignores that, but it refers to this. No. I would love to see it just like James Bond, just play loose with it, where maybe you can have a standalone movie that doesn't reference anything. And then maybe you have a movie with Jamie Lloyd. And then maybe you go back and have a middle sequel with it's Smith's Grove. I mean, I think I would love to see that kind of universe explored. And so in terms of your question, though, not to avoid your question, it would make more sense to me to start cinematically. And once you have that success, then plan your TV show. Because if you assume whatever you do cinematically is going to beg a TV show afterwards, you could screw that up. I mean, what if they had planned ahead of time a TV show that spun off of Halloween Ends? That they would have had to slam on the brakes so hard, right, and completely scrap that development, because the reception is what it is for that movie. And so you kind of have to wait and see before you can count those eggs. That's my 2 cents. What do you guys think?
That's something that me and Sean have kind of recently dug into a little bit, and we were under the notion that we kind of expected the TV show to happen first, and then little breadcrumbs started to come out of it might actually change directions and make more sense to do film first. So to kind of to agree with your point there, I think me and Sean are on the same page with that, where that's the safer avenue to go and create that first. Because like you said, had they set up a series based off of like Ends first, then got that reception, now you're dead in the water, for moving forward with that. So, I've grown, a lot more fond of the idea to kind of take a step back, go cinematic first, and then write your series based off of that.
I mean, I'm excited about what Halloween can look like with long form storytelling. I'm a fan of that. I'm a Flanagan guy, right? I know Mike, Dean, you're not into all the Flanagan stuff necessarily, but and neither am I. You know, I wasn't a big fan of Midnight Club, but there's just so many forms of long form storytelling that the payoff at the end, if done right, can be, amazing to experience. I prefer something that has room to breathe. When I was younger, I wanted everything in 90 minutes. I didn't want to wait for, 8 episodes to, oh my God, it's our first full shot of Michael or something. But now it's a little bit of a different perspective for me, having aged a bit and matured a bit. I love the idea. But when that press release came out and they're talking about cinematic universe, I was just like, oh God, can we just start with one thing first and get that as good as you possibly can and then spawn off from that? Like, I don't care if it takes them 3 or 4 years to put this thing out. Now, we've talked at length. Hey, the writers' strike that ended and the actors one, that expires in 2026, right around Halloween. So I have no doubt they intend to have something out between now and then, because who knows how long another one's going to last. But I just, again, I know people that watch this channel are probably sick of me saying it, but take your time and do it right. Don't rush it. There's no need to rush it. They made a crap ton of money off of the David Gordon Green trilogy, whether you liked all those movies or whether you didn't. They were wildly successful at the box office. Take your time and get it right. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah. And I might mention that sounds, the wanting to develop a cinematic universe, that to me on paper sounds much more like something that Miramax would cook up than Trancas or Malik Akkad, because since Halloween 5 aside, the Akkads have not been about rushing any film into production. If anything, if you read Taking Shape, they pump the brakes more than anything, because they want to feel out an approach, make sure it's the right one. And if it's not, they're not going to sign off on it. They're going to hold up the production until they get it right, or they're just going to let it die until the next iteration is ready to start up. And so that doesn't sound like the slow, calculated carefulness that Trancas has done for 20, 25 years, in my opinion.
I mean, how many times in your novels do you get to hear, okay, well, the Weinsteins are doing this, but the Akkads are doing that, and they're more or less competing against one another. One wants this story, the other one wants that story. This one wants this creative team, the other one wants that creative team. It happens multiple times, and things seem a little more in line now than they were with the Weinsteins involved. But I agree with you. That sounds 100% like Miramax.
And that was the Weinstein's nature, to be pushy and try and ram stuff into production as fast as possible. But also, it's a little bit the nature of the business, and so of course, a studio is going to start foaming at the mouth for a cinematic universe. Everyone wants a cinematic universe, right?
Yeah, it's money. It's money, right? Well, I mean, in most cases, it's money. So, but in terms of like its critical success and its longevity, just take a look at what happened with DC here recently. You have James Gunn rebooting it, and I know not everyone, but there's a bunch of people gung ho about it. But I'm just like, just give me the sequel to the Batman, and maybe I'll see this other stuff. But I'm picky. Movies are expensive now. If I want to take the wife to a movie and get some snacks and have a sitter, you're looking at $100+ a night. So
easy.
You gotta, I don't see 2 or 3 movies a month anymore. I see 5 or 6 a year, it seems like nowadays. So you definitely got to be picky and choosy in terms of how you spend your money. Let me ask you this one. So I'm someone, and I'm probably in the massive minority here, that if they came out and announced that we're not going to do a movie, we're going to do a TV series, but it's going to be some form, whether it's a remake or a sequel or a retelling of Season of the Witch, would you be down for something like that? Because I'm totally down for something like that. I love Halloween 3, but I also feel like when you pay for rights, nobody knows how much Miramax paid for the TV series rights. you're probably paying for the opportunity to use Michael.
I mean, I consider Halloween 3 to be the second best film in the franchise. Absolutely adore Halloween 3. So anything that might tie into that legacy or retell it or pick it up, I'm all for. I really love the idea of why can't we have a branching here where we continue the Haddonfield story and then still do something with Halloween 3. I mean, we can have the anthology Halloween that was talked about back in the 80s, and we can have Haddonfield. I mean, we can do both. I mean, it's a little short-sighted, I think, in 2024 to assume the Halloween brand has to have Michael and has to have all these elements when we've seen it's so recognizable. You could spin it off if you do it well. What do you guys think?
I would be open to it. I think a modernization in some form actually might work and get people on board to go back and check out the original, and then maybe do a comparison. But I actually would like to see some sort of updated, modernized version, and like a retelling, like you mentioned, of Halloween 3.
Yeah, I'm a big H3 guy, so I think there's so much potential there. I love that movie. I love the soundtrack to that movie. It's just, I mean, Cochran is a an interesting character to say the least, and it'd be nice to see what a different performer could bring to that role nowadays. But maybe it is short-sighted. I don't know. I just feel like when you're paying for the rights to the series, you're probably paying for the rights. If it's not Michael Myers, then something that we already know is established in Halloween, whether it's Season of the Witch or whether they, go off the deep end and do something with like Charlie Bowles. I don't think they do just a completely original story that has nothing to do with any of it. Simply because then why are you paying for the rights? It's kind of my theory on that one. But let me ask you this. There's a bunch of creatives out there, and even regardless of what you've heard or not heard, we're just asking for your opinion. Who do you think would be, good for something like a Halloween series in terms of whether it's a writer, cinematographer, director? Who is there a creative that you would like to see involved in future Halloween projects?
I mean, this is the lazy answer I'm about to give you, but personally, I think there's a few creatives that have already been involved with the franchise that I think left a lot on the table and didn't get a chance to express their vision unhindered. And you can guess probably who I might be about to say. People like Daniel Ferrens, and I mean, his name's right there, Steph Hutchinson. I mean, people who really showed evidence of a broad, bold vision that just didn't get the stage and the support and the opportunity to express it. I think when you get people like Ferrens and Hutchinson and a few others that demonstrate a deep understanding and appreciation of the source material, that's who I'm excited to see new material from. I don't like when you have someone like Dominic Othen and Gerard who comes in and says, I didn't watch the movies. I didn't really want to check it out. I just wanted to do my own thing. That approach it concerns me. It's like, well, if you're not understanding where we've been, why should I care about where you're about to take us? So, I mean, yeah, there's countless people that would be great to bring on that are not involved with the franchise, but I'd still love to see what some of the old school guys have to bring to the table.
Dean, what about you?
Yeah, and we've talked at length about that here. They're two names that we've mentioned countless times here. So I would agree 100% that those are two guys that I think deserve, to step up to the plate and take a full swing at a project at length and give us, their vision and bring something to the table that I think would be enjoyable for, I would say, a majority of the fan base, whether they tie into old material or come back and bring us something new. I'd be on board either way.
Oh, that's interesting. Greg Nicotero. That's a neat idea.
Oh, yeah.
In the comments.
Dustin kind of stole my thunder there. Yeah, they're the two names that I had at the top of my list too. We've had Daniel on here before. He was just very forthright and honest, and it was a really fun interview. And then the other one's Steph Hutchinson. I'm not saying definitively that Steph is the creator of Halloween or one of the creators that has done Halloween work, that has done the most, pardon me. But when you look at Steph's catalog of work, the One Good Scare comic, the Night Dance comic, there's other comics. He took his pass at Halloween 3D. He has his Halloween reboot trilogy. Also, those things didn't come to light, obviously. But I would argue that you leave names like a Cad and the Weinsteins and Carpenter out. I don't know if someone has done more work on Halloween than Steph Hutchinson. He's done a ton, and sadly, it's a ton that a lot of people don't even know about. And like the Night Dance comics, I haven't read them in years, but like they were fantastic. That is a level of elevated writing for a comic book that you just don't see. And one of the things that one of the quotes I believe from Taking Shape 2 that is yours, I believe, Dustin, is you mentioned how Steph's writing. Now, I don't remember if this was for the reboot trilogy or Halloween 3D, or maybe it applies to both. Might be almost like too deep and too good almost for what the Halloween franchise has had before it.
I would say the same thing about his comics. They had no right to be as good as they were, being tie-in comic books to a slasher franchise, which is enough for even the fans to just write off and not want to check out. But I implore anyone, find a way to get those comics. I mean, 30 Years of Terror, his short stories that were published online, Night Dance, The First Death of Laurie Strode. I mean, really great stuff that enhances the mythology that you already know. I mean, it's so good. And, I mean, there's backing up a little bit, there's Steph, there's Daniel Farrens, even someone like Kevin Williamson from Halloween H2O. Kevin Williamson, Halloween H2O was supposed to be, we got the guy from Scream, and now he loves, he loved Halloween, so now he's going to get his shot. Kevin Williamson was so busy prepping Dawson's Creek and doing other things when Halloween H2O came out. Halloween H2O was mostly written by Robert Zappia and Matt Greenberg. Kevin Williamson's fingerprint on it feels huge because of the Scream vibes, but it's not like Kevin Williamson sat down and said, here's my Halloween movie. He didn't do that. He didn't have time. So what would Kevin Williamson have given us had he had an opportunity, like Dean said a minute ago, a full swing, to just have a blank page and the opportunity to just give us his vision? Because Kevin Williamson was really, they begged him and dragged him in after multiple scripts had been written, and he did leave his impression on it, but it's really the work of two other guys. That's another one that I think, in terms of people that have already been involved, that I would love to see come back.
Again, I don't want you to comment on other people's work, but I'll be blunt in terms of something that we discussed on this channel a few weeks ago. We had, actually more than a few weeks ago, last year, actually, 2023, we had heard there would be reprints of novels coming. That did come to light. You had the reprint of Halloween 1, which, Dean, I think you said it got delayed. Mm-hmm. And then there was word of either, I don't know if there were new comics. I don't know if it was a certain comic that was never released back in the day, or if they're just reissues of comics that were already out. But none of that has come to light yet. Maybe it won't, but I suspect it will. But I got to tell you guys, my hope is that Steph is involved in more than just the comics. As we know now, when you do a series, it's not just about a showrunner. You have to have an entire writer's room now. That was part of the new agreement. So whether he could be the guy or one of the people involved in new Halloween material, I definitely think guys like Steph, Daniel, even Kevin Williamson, I think he might be involved with Crystal Lake.
Well, what's great is that Steph has still remained close to the franchise. He was on one of the 4K. He was on a special feature on the Halloween Resurrection 4K disc a couple of years ago, talking about his comics. He was at H45 just a few months ago, and so he's still around. And I'd like to think there's some divine reason for that. My fingers are crossed.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I won't go any further down that road. But we can hope. I will ask you this, though. You brought it up. You mentioned the first death of Laurie Strode. We only got 2 of those. The way that certain quotes come across in Taking Shape 2, I feel like you either got to read the final part of that or got some insight on the final part of that. We're obviously not asking you to give it away, but I believe you made a quote like, something along the lines of like the fan base needs to lobby to see this comic because of how incredible it was. Is there anything more you can add on top of that?
The first 2 issues of the first death of Laurie Strode, I mean, if you're a fan of the Halloween and Halloween 2, you know, think about what would have happened in the year or 2 after that one night's events in 1978 in the lives of Loomis, Laurie, and Sheriff Brackett. The third issue just brings it to a wonderful close. You know, I don't know what I should or shouldn't say here. It's fantastic. It's really good. I'm praying that it sees the light of day. I know that the Universal and Blumhouse and Halloween Ends, you know, really ties up the merchandising rights and the new production rights, and everything get really complicated when there's a new movie because there are windows of exclusivity. And I think that's made a lot of ancillary projects like comics and novels difficult to get out. And I'm so happy they got the Richard Curtis novelization through. That's like a miracle. And you only hope that it opens the floodgates to other stuff if they find a way to get it out. And man, yeah, the third issue is the conclusion you would hope for. I mean, it's so dramatic and good.
Dean, do you have anything before we move on to another topic?
Yeah, just real quick. That sounds amazing. I'm a huge fan of Halloween 1 and 2, and I've always wondered, like, you know, a few years later, what might have unfolded and what did that night lead to. So fingers crossed that something like that comes to light and gets maybe a publication or something of the sort. So yeah, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed hard for something like that.
I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. And by the way, if anybody has a question for Dustin in the chat, feel free to enter it, and we'll put it up on screen as long as it's reasonable. I got to tell you, when I sat down and read Steph's take on Halloween 3D in your book for the first time, and then listened to it again on the audiobook, it is not the movie I would have ever thought that it was going to be. Like, you're coming off, it's painted in a way where it's kind of supposed to be the sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I think the intent was to have Brad Dourif in it, and yet also comes across like it doesn't have to be a sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, and Brackett is a huge part of that story, which is great because honestly, I think Brad Dourif's portrayal of Brackett in those 2 movies is criminally underrated. Love him in it. I just really was taken back by that story. I thought they went a wonderful way with it, and I loved the focus on Brackett, this guy who's lost everything, and he's sort of spiraling a bit, and then he sort of has a way to find hope in a way, anyways, a way to redeem himself. What was your thoughts, Dustin, the first time that you had a chance to take a look at Steph's Halloween 3D? Because it's very different. It's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, and so I want to preface my thoughts on that by saying that I also, Steph's Halloween 3D, chronologically in terms of development, came after the failed Halloween 3D by Todd Farmer and Patrick Lussier, which I also thought was a great sequel. I would have loved to have seen. It felt like both the continuation of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and kind of a evolution into its own thing. It continued the story of Laurie Strode as she went to like a women's prison psych hospital kind of thing. And it was just, it continued that, but Brackett wasn't in it. So really you could have had that Halloween 3D and then had Steph's Halloween 3. They could have gone one after the other and not overlapped because Laurie's not in Steph's Halloween 3. But Steph's Halloween 3 feels to me like it was made for people who hated Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2. I mean, tonally, it ditches the redneck psychobilly kind of thing. It's tonally completely separate, even though it's the same character. It's Brad Dourif's Sheriff Brackett. And I love that after that crushing moment in Halloween 2, where he finds Annie's body and Brad Dourif just acts his ass off.
Oh, yeah.
In responding to that, you think this man is broken and could not be broken any further. And that's where Sheriff Brackett starts that Halloween 3 by Steph Hutchinson. He starts it thinking, I have nothing left to lose. And Michael shows him, you absolutely do. I'm not through with you. And Steph imbues, it would have been Tyler Maine's Michael Myers, right? He gives him an intelligence that was completely absent from Rob Zombie's Halloween movies, because in Steph's Halloween 3, Michael doesn't just want to kill Sheriff Brackett. It's not about that. It is about breaking his spirit and getting revenge, because in the opening moments of Steph's Halloween 3, we see Sheriff Brackett in his grief and anger. He burns the Myers house to the ground, which Michael takes very personally. And it would have been such a vehicle for Dourif. And I hate that it didn't go further, because I think it would have won back a lot of fans that Halloween 2 ran off. And I love movies where the Shape isn't just about killing, where he has an agenda. The Shape, if you look at Halloween, he's a kind of a dark prankster. He likes to send messages. He's about presentation, and he doesn't always just want to kill someone. Sometimes, like with Loomis, he could have killed Loomis in many of the movies. He wants to break Loomis, and that's something that Steph's Halloween trilogy also really examined. But yeah, his Halloween 3, I'm so glad in Taking Shape 2, we dedicated a chapter to it, and we get to talk to Steph about it, because it really, I think, would have been one of the all-time great sequels.
Yeah, I was completely blown away by it. And I didn't expect to be, because I'm not the biggest Rob Zombie Halloween guy. I don't hate them by any means, but they're just not my go-to. I prefer the Michael that you just described, really. But the most impressive part of that story, in my opinion anyways, is the fact that it wasn't, Trancas that squashed it, and maybe the Weinsteins that didn't want to do anything with it. I don't remember specifically, but it sounded like, if I remember correctly, Steph was the one that this isn't working for me. I'm not going any further with this, despite apparently having really good feedback from Like a Cat. I think for a creative to be able to say, hey, even though, one of the main guys we need to sign off on this is gun-ho for it, there's just something here not working. And I believe one of the things was the 3D concept he didn't like, which obviously ended up fading out shortly after that, I believe. But your take on that, Dustin?
I think Steph has a habit of undervaluing his work. I just thought his Halloween 3 was such a bold, strong, dramatic, well fleshed out story that was, Michael has a plan in the movie, and it's evident, and you don't realize what he's doing until late in the movie, when all the puzzle pieces suddenly click into place, and you realize, it's got what I call some oh shit moments, where your brain puts it together. You're like, oh my God. And it's also, I think it would have been a very scary movie, because it, in horror movies, we don't want to see the animal killed. We don't want to see the kid killed. There's certain lines you don't cross. And look, Steph's Halloween 3 has no problem killing kids. And it's shocking. It's disturbing. And when a movie will go there, anything's possible. And you feel the stakes in a story like that, because is Brackett going to live or die? And at a certain point, does it matter? Because everyone is on the chopping block. I mean, anything could happen. And I love that movie where the stakes are that high. I hate when you feel like, oh, you've got the safe characters that
right.
Obviously they're going to live. In that Halloween 3, you have no idea.
Dean, you got anything? Yeah. So that's something that I have not had the chance to kind of, take a peek at or anything yet. So I guess my question would be, if you were to compare it to, I guess, the recent trilogy, and the direction that Halloween Ends went, it's very different from the first two. Would you compare this version of Halloween 3 to Rob Zombie's in a similar fashion, but in the sense to where, we have a lot of the fan base that doesn't really care for Rob Zombie's 1 and 2. Do you think they would, jump on board for this version of Halloween 3 that would come from Steph and kind of like, okay, that's what we're looking for? Like, would it have that kind of effect on them?
Tonally, and I'm speaking, having not looked at it in several years, and I'm speaking from memory, tonally, it felt to me like a marriage of Rob Zombie and like Halloween 4. Like Halloween, Haddonfield in that Halloween 3 isn't quite such a degenerate backwoods like place. It's yeah, so it's much more a pleasant watch that way, but it ditches some of the more controversial aspects of Rob Zombie's movies. And of course, you know, I think Rob Zombie would hate it because Rob would hate any continuation of his own vision that he didn't personally produce. He would have, you know, he said negative things about the Halloween 3D by Todd Farmer and Patrick Lussier. And I personally thought that was a great continuation of his style. Maybe that's why I hated it, because his style, to an extent, is imitatable. It is something that you can say, here's the ingredients. We can run with this. Flick Symmetry says, asked if there was ever plans to turn Night Dance into a movie. I've not heard any plans for them to have. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was Byron Weaver. I'm so sorry. The comments flicked. Byron says, was there any idea of having an adaptation of the comic book Halloween Night Dance? If there's ever been talk of having one of the comic books turned into a movie, I've never heard those rumors. Not saying those conversations haven't taken place, but I haven't heard it. That would be fantastic. Oh, and Flick Symmetry said, as a 30-year police veteran, an officer's worst nightmare is losing a child to a violent homicide. Yeah, and so Halloween, there's nothing you can do about it. It's an intense subject matter. And in Steph's Halloween 3 absolutely played on the PTSD that Sheriff Brackett had from that. You know, I love when Halloween movies go to those dark places that are taboo. You know, you're not supposed to kill the kid. You're not supposed to have a parent. And that's one thing I thought Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 did so well, is it showed the pain of losing a child. It wasn't just another death that we cut away from and it's over, added to the kill count. You felt the gravity of it, which a lot of slasher movies don't bother to do because they want to keep the action going.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't expecting much when I first read Halloween 3D covered and taken shape 2. But wow, was I blown away. Again, I'm a huge Brad Dourif fan, and it's kind of a shame we didn't get a chance to see him use that material. I thought it would have been a lot of fun. At the same time, I kind of agree with Steph's point of view, like his take on it. I almost feel like the 3D aspect of it would get in the way creatively of the film.
It was way too serious of a movie to be given 3D. I mean, I think 3D at its best is a gimmick. And if you have seriously good dramatic material, I think you risk cheapening it with that. Because of course, at some point, someone's going to go, we need to throw a yo-yo at the camera, or we need to throw an eyeball at the camera, you know, and then you're doing the schlock of it, and it brings it down.
Let's shift gears here to another Steph project. Halloween, the Halloween reboot trilogy. Now, the first time I read this was years ago, and I don't remember like being overly like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then a couple years passed, listened to it on the audiobook, and I have to tell you, I don't know if it's because in those couple of years I've watched so much Flanagan stuff, and this really reminds me of Mike Flanagan stuff, the Halloween reboot trilogy. But I thought this was incredible. And more importantly, if I can venture back to our first topic this evening, I think when you're looking at a new Halloween series movie, in my opinion, I don't think we can go back to, okay, this is a sequel to Halloween 78 again, or this is a sequel to, I suppose you could have done Halloween Ends if it was received better. But that would just not be a wise idea at this point. The Halloween reboot trilogy really sort of clears the deck, and yet still uses legacy characters, just not in the way you expect them to be used. And I think at least there's a foundation here where I could see maybe not the carbon copy of the trilogy itself, but I could certainly see elements of this being the basis of a hard reboot. This is the beginning of a new Halloween story, and here we go. And you know, it was Steph Hutchinson that did that one too. So, Dustin, do you think, anyways, that there's some groundwork here for possibly what they do next?
I mean, if they were smart, I think that's the first place that you should go if you're going. If your plan is not to do what I said earlier, which was play loose with your continuity and your timeline, if your plan is to reboot and start from the ground up, there's no better place to go that I can think of than Steph Hutchinson's what's called the reboot trilogy, which he proposed some years ago. And that was 3 movies called Rise of the Boogeyman, The Witching Hour, and Fires of Samhain or Samhain. And those were the 3 movies. And I was so excited and proud that I was able to twist Steph's arm into talking about this for Taking Shape 2, because before Taking Shape 2, it really wasn't discussed or known about. But he developed such an interesting spin on what Halloween could be by taking the bones of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's original premise and making Loomis the basis of the storyline, not Laurie. And in the trilogy, God, Loomis goes through unrelenting hell, levels of hell, in trying to track down and stop Michael. And it's strongly embraces the supernatural. I mean, we're deep into like Halloween 5 supernatural territory. I mean, it's that far. But it's done in such a serious way that, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, Michael his goal isn't to kill Loomis. His goal is to break Loomis, to take everything from him, to take his identity, his life, destroy his past, turn him in. You know, he turns Loomis from a doctor whose goal is to preserve life and save lives. In the second film of the trilogy, he turns him into a killer. I mean, with his, masterminding of these crazy plans. And the third film in the trilogy, Fires of Samhain, would have gone so out there that I would have just reading through the premise of it. It just sounds so amazing. But of course, it's going to sound hokey because I can't describe it the way Steph can. But there's a moment that I visualize in my mind where Michael commands, he takes over the residence of Smith's Grove, hundreds of criminally ill psychiatric patients, and they become like his drones, his not minions, but he controls them. And so picture not one shape, 100 shapes. And within the institution, as he starts to take psychic control of their minds and bodies, they start ripping at their gowns and bed sheets to craft these crude white masks to represent who they are. And so Loomis is dealing with a literal army of shapes. And just when you thought that's as crazy as it gets, towards the end of the third film, and this is before it was cool, before it was all over the pop culture, we get into the multiverse of Halloween, where Loomis sees into different universes that have the shape. He sees into the Rob Zombie Halloween verse. He sees into the Halloween 4 Halloween verse. I mean, it's done with so much more class and sophistication than I can possibly verbalize here. If you have Taking Shape 2, I beg you, if you skimmed those chapters, go back and read it. It's the reboot trilogy section. It's crazy. It's great stuff. Sorry, that was like verbal diarrhea as I tried to describe it.
It has mesmerized me for a few weeks now. I've read over it or listened to it anyways a couple of times back, and it's filled with so much rich material. There's some subversion of expectations there. Like, you get Laurie, so obviously you think, oh well, Laurie Strode's in this, so we're gonna follow her for 3 movies. Wrong. Dead relatively early. And I just thought it was so well done. And again, you mentioned in your book that Steph's ability to have long form storytelling, to have things be planted early to be paid off later on, really does sound like basically what they're looking for with what's going on with whatever the next project is. But Dean, did you have anything on the reboot trilogy, which we're still actively reviewing here on the channel?
Yeah, we just covered it very recently. So we made it through most of all of Rise of the Boogeyman, and the Witching Hour, and we covered about the first, I'd say, quarter of Fires of Samhain. So we still have to continue that. But for me, I'm very much like a traditionalist for the most part. But reading this, or I had to listen to it through Audible, but the whole reboot trilogy was very, very intriguing for me. And I really like the direction of taking like this psychological attack against Loomis and really trying to kind of break his entire character. It's such a different direction for Michael to go beyond just being a slasher and pursuing someone's mindset and really trying to kind of break them at every aspect to kind of really bring it home that it's more than just, attacks and death. That he's really going to kind of dive a lot deeper just to break somebody.
And like Sean mentioned a minute ago, Laurie Strode, shows up, and Steph, instead of using the familiar tropes and elements to make you feel comfortable with familiarity, he uses the established tropes to surprise you and to pull the rug out from under you. And the trilogy at different points has these just completely, utterly shocking moments that I'm just like, that would just be a stunner to see on the big screen. And I just, it's a rich trove of new direction that is just familiar enough, but also bold enough that I would love to see it played out long form, whether that be a trilogy or a TV show.
One of the things you say in the novel is Steph doesn't care about your preconceived notions about Halloween or the lore. And honestly, to me, obviously there's a line, and I'm not here to whine about Halloween Ends. I think Halloween Ends is it's a fantastic, like Dean and I disagree a little bit on Ends, but we feel the same about maybe the treatment of Michael in it. But like, it's a wonderfully shot film. The cinematography is great. The score is great. The sound design might be the best of any Halloween movie. And the acting might be the best of any Halloween movie. It's incredible. But again, I think there was a line in terms of not crossing that turns the fan base against you. And with social media nowadays, everybody has a voice. Everybody wants to be heard. So even with the reboot trilogy, if that came to light, or some level of it came to light in a new project, I think the idea of doing away with the preconceived notions of characters or story elements is a fantastic idea, as long as you know where that line is, because nowadays it just doesn't take much to piss off any fan base.
And for Halloween Ends, and I'll say this in the most troll way possible, I love Halloween Ends, and so I'm constantly like trying to inflame people on social media about it with their opinions. But I do understand the complaint of, with the line for most people is, there's not enough Michael Myers in my film. The line's here of what I want, and it's way down here. And Steph's Halloween reboot trilogy wouldn't have that problem, because the shape is all throughout it, and you would get all the wonderful shape moments you would want. You would just get so much else you wouldn't be expecting. And that's, at this point in the Halloween franchise, that's what we need, is not people that are going to do, like we had the comfort movie of like greatest hits. We had Halloween 2018. We don't need it again. Now we had that and it was nice, but now it's time to shake it up and do different things. And they did that with Halloween Ends. Let's do it again with the next one. When it starts to fall into that when it's so familiar, they blur together and they're so that's when Halloween, I think, is really going to run into the ground. But so long as they can keep it fresh with new directions and ideas, I think the audience will be here for it.
The last thing I'll say about Steph before I hand it off to Dean for one is he has a quote in your book where it's like, too many Halloween creatives in the past, and sadly, this was very true with the David Gordon Green team. There was so many of them involved in the writing process for the last movie that they just want to end it, right? Like, there's been so many times in the franchise where said creative wants to end it, and Steph, the whole reason he goes the I guess the multiverse route is to give you so many infinite possibilities of where you could take a story next that could loosely tie back to something. And it's when we're seeing that multiverse, as you mentioned in your book, it's not just the movies we've seen, but it's visions of Michael we haven't seen as well. And that's intriguing. I don't know if you said that you think Steph doesn't necessarily give his work enough credit, but like, I think he understands the industry too, in terms of, hey, this is a property, this is an IP, and you want to get as much as you can out of it. You don't want it to sit there dormant like it has for years, where you're not doing anything, whether it's comics or books or action figures or whatever. There's too many times where Halloween has done nothing for 2 or 3 years. They seem pretty dead set on not having that happen this time around. Like, I really do think Steph gets it in every single way in terms of what could come next.
And the multiversal aspect of his third Halloween movie, it's not like it was in The Flash recently, where the heroes show up and it's like, oh, cool, Christopher Reeve, and oh, cool, there's that person. It's not about that. It's about actually validating the films and the franchise instead of writing them off. Because as much as Steph is a creative, he's also a fan. He understands that perspective. And if your favorite movie is Halloween 4 or 5, well, guess what? That timeline has been ignored since 1998. Those films don't even count anymore, which, I mean, that sucks. That's disappointing. And so his intention, I think, with the multiversal aspect was to validate all the films in the franchise and the ones you haven't seen, to say that this is all Halloween. We're not pushing films outside the umbrella. We're actually bringing them together in this weird web. I love it.
Dean, you got anything?
Yeah, in terms of like the whole multiverse, it can sometimes be like a touchy subject, but I think the approach on it was great. You have, the peeks into what we already know, but as Sean mentioned, we have that look of versions we've never seen before. So I think it would be a great idea if they introduce that, to move forward from that with, maybe a new film or something, even literature, of taking a peek on like a new version of Michael that we haven't seen, and then creatively coming up with that storyline and then carrying forward with that, because we're so used to what we have already. Why not take it a different direction and explore a little bit?
I think my dream team, not that we're talking dream teams necessarily, like if you could pair Steph Hutchinson, Daniel Ferrens, and Mike Flanagan together to go do some Halloween series, that'd be incredible. But it sounds like, I believe you covered in Taking Shape too, that Mike Flanagan took a crack at something Halloween over a weekend anyways, around the time of Halloween Returns, I believe, or just before Halloween Returns, and then he ended up passing on the project. I think that's in one of your 2 novels. I can't remember which one. It's been a while since I read that particular chapter, but I also think any Flanagan involvement is basically out the window, since his deal with was it Prime, Amazon, that he signed a deal with? So unless Halloween went the Amazon route, I don't see that happening. But we'll have to wait and see. In terms of the Halloween comics, is there any that are like your favorite? I mean, obviously you raved about the death of Laurie Strode, the first death of Laurie Strode Part 3, which was never released. But in terms of the ones that were released, do you have a favorite, and why?
Well, gosh, the first death of Laurie Strode is my favorite. It's the one I go back to the most and just stare at the panels and just spiritually feel the connection to Halloween 2. I mean, it's such a good continuation of all that. I mean, you find out what happened to characters that you want to know what happened to, even like Jimmy, the ambulance driver or paramedic. You find out that he suffered a concussion in the first death of Laurie Strode. I mean, you get all these story details of the fallout and the response, and how did Laurie manage to finish high school? What was her reputation in Haddonfield? And how welcome or unwelcome was Loomis in Haddonfield after Halloween 2? I mean, pretty damn unwelcome. But I'm such a pushover and easy to please. Even the Halloween comics that Steph didn't write, I really enjoy. Do you guys remember the first Halloween comic that came out that was Phil Nutman and Daniel Ferrens? It was the continuation from Halloween 6.
I don't think I've actually read that one either.
Yeah, I
What? Well,
haven't.
then don't let me spoil it. Dean, you know what I'm talking about.
I've vaguely, yeah, I've heard bits and pieces and like small details here and there, but never fully through. So, the
Devil's
comics,
Due Publishing, yeah.
okay, yeah, the comics are a world I haven't really dove into too much quite yet.
There's three comics that came out. I want to say 1999. I can remember going to Spencer's Gifts and buying them, which is the weirdest
Oh
place
wow,
I've ever bought a comic from.
yeah.
But they pick up with Tommy Doyle and Kara Strode and the town of Haddonfield. You find out how much of this town is in on the Cult of Thorn and how much isn't. And that to me,
Oh
just
wow,
getting to see the continuation of Halloween 6, because what a cliffhanger. What an unresolved whole storyline to get to, and it merges with Halloween H2O as well. And that's like I said, the late great Phil Nutman, and then Daniel Farrens wrote that. But yeah, I mean, most of the best comics have Steph's name on them somewhere, but that's another one that I enjoy just for how bizarre it is, but also satisfying to get to go back to there.
Okay, so I'll tread carefully with this next question because you basically already said that you'll be working on other things. You're not ready to announce them, but I'll word it this way, and I know Dean has a Taking Shape question as well. But is there? I believe there's more lost sequels out there that weren't covered in Taking Shape 2. Is there the possibility, anyways, of a third part to Taking Shape, whether it's lost sequels or something else, somewhere down the road, or have you sort of put Taking Shape to rest for now?
Taking Shape is maybe at rest right now. I would love to do a Taking Shape 3. I think there's so much in this franchise that could be covered that hasn't been covered. We knew, and we said in the introduction to Taking Shape 2, this is not all the lost sequels. We had to stop at some point. It's a 600-page book. There are more lost sequels, enough to fill another 600 pages. I don't know, but possibly. You know, the other thing about Taking Shape is with the first book, which is about Halloween 1 through 2018, you know, it's very flattering when people say to me, oh, it's the ultimate companion. Oh, it's the Bible. Oh, you guys covered everything. We didn't at all, not even remotely. You know, that book has a very narrow focus on the development of the story. And so it's mostly about the writing and the deleted scenes and the editing and how it came together. We didn't talk about casting, filming, special effects, the music, the locations. We basically only covered pre-production and post-production because we realized if we didn't narrow the scope just to development, it was going to be a 3,000-page book.
wow.
And you know, it was too great of a challenge. So, I mean, I would love nothing more than to do another Taking Shape book, but my co-writer and I, Travis Mullins, we both have our own projects right now that we're working on. He's doing working on his first solo authored book, which I can't say anything about because that's his announcement to make when he's ready. But I'm helping him on that a little bit. And like I said, I'm publishing 2 other books this year that are very much in the same vein as the books I've done. One is a fantastic biography on a master of horror, and the other is a franchise companion book. And I'm excited to bring those out later this year. So Taking Shape 3, never say never.
Awesome.
Not right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love that. Entertainment Wizard has a question here. Dustin, any idea if the remaining cut footage for Halloween 2 1981 still exists?
Great question that I've actually been asking very recently to some people. If it does, I think it would only be with someone like Rick Rosenthal. There are so many deleted scenes from Halloween 2, if you don't know, that we haven't seen. Scenes that were shot and removed, scenes that were half filmed and then abandoned, scenes that weren't even in the script, that were improvised. I mean, we've already seen a lot of like the TV cut stuff, but there's even more Halloween 2. I mean, there are cues on the soundtrack for Halloween 2 that correspond to scenes that were deleted. And so we have the music from these scenes, but not the scenes themselves. So I haven't heard that. I actually helped out recently on an upcoming re-release of Halloween 2 that's going to be on 4K Blu-ray coming up. And that was a question that I pushed hard, which is there any way to find that footage. Is there any, even in like work print format, even on like old VHS, and there were just no leads to be had.
Well, Dean's over the moon. He's our physical media guru here.
Yeah, you already caught my interest with that. So we got the Scream Factory H2 a couple years ago, and you're mentioning there's going to be a newer, updated 4K release for Halloween 2 now.
It's going to be it's not a Region 1 release, but it's pretty cool companies putting it together. I don't know what all new they have planned. I actually recorded a commentary for it,
nice.
an audio commentary. We'll see if it winds up on the disc. I used my crappy at-home mic that I'm using right now, so we'll see if it's up to par quality-wise. If so, that'd be neat. But yeah, I hold out hope with the deleted scenes. I mean, Halloween 2. Like, it seems like the most interesting deleted scenes we've yet to see.
We'll spend some time asking some questions before we get to Halloween Returns here, or answering some questions. Byron asked, Dustin, what was the big difference on all three versions of Halloween Asylum, 2004, 2005, 2013?
Great question. Well, Halloween Asylum 2004 dealt with Dr. Loomis's son. And so he goes to work at Smith's Grove, hoping to prevent the next Michael Myers from happening, kind of trying to prevent, it's a preventative thing. I'm not going to let what happened before with my father happen again. And so he's basically dealing with like a copycat, imitative killer, right? So that's the first Halloween Asylum, which is not really Michael Myers throughout the whole thing. Then you had Halloween
Resurrection.
No, so that was not a direct sequel to Resurrection. Halloween Asylum 2005, that was a direct sequel to Resurrection, where it opens with the Shape murdering Freddie Harris, Busta Rhymes, from Resurrection. And then he goes to Smith's Grove, where he's put to death by the electric chair. Now, that immediately begs the question, how is Smith's Grove a psychiatric hospital and a prison that kills people? But, I mean, they could have sorted that out. But what Bob Weinstein had put in the script, it was at his insistence, when they go to electrocute Michael Myers to put him to death, instead of killing him, he gets superpowers from the electricity. So now you have a superpowered Shape who can, like, control electricity. So already those two Halloween Asylums, the son of Dr. Loomis and a copycat killer, and then superpowered Michael, those are very different from each other. But then there was Halloween Asylum 2013, several years later, where the Shape is caught and, you know what? Fuck, I just got it backwards. It's the 2013 one where Michael gets the superpowers.
Yeah,
Halloween
Asylum electricity, right?
Asylum 2005, he's sentenced to death by the electric chair, but it goes wrong and he breaks out without superpowers. So all three Asylums, the Asylum in question is Smith's Grove, and they're very different from each other. They were really two things around the 2000s they were trying to get into a movie was bringing back Sheriff Brackett, and then Smith's Grove. They wanted to go back to the Asylum to shake it up, and neither one of those ideas stuck by the time we did the Blumhouse movies, right?
Our buddy Flick says, Dustin, as a Jaws ride researcher, you may be interested to know my dad's engineering firm in, I believe that's Minnesota, developed the T-Rex for the Jurassic Park River ride. They were also working on a new Jaws ride at that time. I believe you have a book on a Jaws ride, do you not?
I do. The Jaws ride at Universal Studios Florida is very close to my heart. Even though it's closed, I wrote a book about the history of it. Adventures in Amity, Tales from the Jaws Ride. And Flick Symmetry, that is cool as hell that your dad helped develop the T-Rex animatronic for the Jurassic Park River Ride. If you haven't been to one of the Universal parks and ridden the Jurassic Park ride, it culminates in a massive T-Rex animatronic rushing at you, and it is breathtaking to behold for two reasons. One, the scale of it is massive, but also how much it moves. I mean, it is not a static prop. It is moving up and down and chomping and rushing you. So it's very cool. And the fact they've maintained it pretty well over the years, I think. So Flix, that's awesome. Your dad is the coolest in my mind. I wish my dad was that cool.
Justin asked, can you describe any of the H2 81 scenes that you knew know were cut? Pardon me.
Yeah, Halloween 2, you know, the biggest in my mind was one that I really want to see. It's in the novelization, I believe, but the TV producer, the woman in the blue dress that you see talking to Dana Carvey, she was going to be how Michael Myers originally got to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. He was going to hide in her trunk. He would puncture her tire. She would stop to change the flat tire. While she was changing the flat tire, the Shape would kill her and then drive her car the rest of the way to Haddonfield Memorial. Now, while she was changing the tire, a redneck would show up. The redneck was going to be played by Rick Rosenthal himself. He had cast himself as the redneck. And that would be why eventually, you know, the news crew of Dana Carvey and Robert Mundy, the reporter, they would all later show up at Haddonfield Memorial thinking this is where we're supposed to be. The news producer, our boss's car is here, but why isn't she here? Well, she's not there because Michael killed her and took her car. But of course, they get inside the hospital hoping to interview Laurie Strode. Mrs. Alves finds the news crew walking the hallways of the hospital, gets pissed off and kicks them out. You know, and of course, you're not going to get an interview with Laurie Strode. She's recovering from surgery. That's a whole sequence. And when they cut, I love it because when they cut out the news producer's death, suddenly they had three big plot holes they had to figure out. How does Michael know Laurie is at Haddonfield Memorial? How does he get there? How does he know the way? And so those are things they all had to address with new scenes that John Carpenter shot in post-production. But there's that stuff with the producer. There's let me see. There's some neat scenes with the nurses that were cut, like Nurse Karen. Michael accidentally sets off one of those little monkey toys with the cymbals that claps. He sets it off in the nursery where she's working, and you know there's a long tense sequence where she finds it and turns it off, and you're expecting Michael to jump out and kill her, and he doesn't. And Rick Rosenthal had a few scenes like that because he wanted to set you up for a jump scare and then not have a payoff, to really get you off balance, to not know when is the Shape going to strike and when is he not. Those false scares, there were a few more of those in there. And off the top of my head, I'm going dry now. I think in Halloween 2, in Taking Shape 1, we talk about the scenes that were filmed but not included. I think there's more information there.
Which you can purchase on Amazon, ladies and gentlemen, or on Audible. So I guess that brings us to Halloween Returns, which is a story Dean and I have both kind of fallen in love with and have had the debate. If you could take Halloween Returns and put it up against Halloween 2018, obviously Halloween 2018 is a complete movie that's been fully produced and acted, and it has everything, where Halloween Returns is multiple scripts, I believe, exist for it, and they were little less than a month away from shooting when that got shut down. What do you prefer? Like, simply the story, Dustin. Are you a Halloween 2018 guy, or do you think they left a real gem on the table with Halloween Returns?
I liked Halloween Returns a lot, and I thought it was a bad decision that they didn't move forward with it. Halloween Returns did a lot of things that I liked a lot. Anytime a sequel tries to bring in Silver Shamrock into the story and like tie in Halloween 3, it's an immediate win for me, which that one did. The Harry Grimbridge, the guy who dies in the opening scene of Halloween 3, was a character in Halloween Returns and ran a mask shop in Haddonfield. But aside from that, I just thought the story was so cool. But it was another one of those movies that excluded movies. You know, it stuck itself in the timeline as like a branching point. Deputy Hunt came back. A lot of people like Deputy Hunt from Halloween 2. It was great to have him back. And I thought it made up for the fact that Dr. Loomis wasn't going to be in it pretty well. What was the doctor's name that was in it? His colleague?
Rogers.
Dr. Rogers. Yeah, so I think Dr. Loomis name drops Dr. Rogers, right? In
Halloween
at least one of
2.
them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Dr. Rogers was a pretty good fill-in, I thought, to fill in the void of Dr. Loomis. And what Michael does to him, damn. Like, I liked it. And you guys liked it too.
Mhm.
I loved it. I loved the setting for the execution, but really what I loved the most was the fact that it really isn't a Haddonfield story. It's a story where we're going to go to Russellville, but then we're going to call back. We're going to have not just the Charlie Bull story come up again, but you're actually going to go to the house. That's some deep pulling there that I, as a diehard, I love. I don't know if the general going audience would have gotten anything out of it, but as a diehard Halloween fan, I would have been over the moon. And funny enough, as the story is being told again, the story gets cut off in the exact same part it gets cut off with Halloween 1. But I do love the fact that you actually go to where the Bulls lived and their farmhouse there. And
that was rich. Yeah.
Yeah. The dynamic is really, really good in it. And then obviously the post-credit scene would have been, it sets you up for a sequel and the Loomis reveal. And I just thought it was done so well that when you take the story, again, simply looking at it from the story, because it's hard to compare something that wasn't made to something that was, I think they missed one here.
Oh, for sure. The one controversial part I thought that fans might have taken issue was in the finale. Michael is, again, not some brainless slasher. He's extremely intelligent. What does he do? He rips Dr. Rogers' tongue out, puts the mask on him, and sends him out with a knife duct taped to his hand so that the police might kill him, which is a great diversion. But he also writes a message in blood on the wall of a barn, which is, this town will never be safe again. And that, to me, is a profound moment because Michael doesn't really communicate much of anything. I mean, he's written words in blood before, like sister or Samhain at the classroom in Halloween 2, but we've never had a complete thought from adult Michael. And it almost seemed unnecessary to me that whether you write that or not, this town will never feel safe again. But I could see that being kind of picked apart by the fan base. But other than that, I thought it was a very well done sequel. Yeah, and the ending with Dr. Loomis, I mean, that would have been I thought that would have been a much more effective way to use Loomis than Halloween Kills did. I thought Loomis looked fantastic in Halloween Kills. I love those flashback sequences, but to use them so early in the film, is that the most effective way? Or is it more effective to bring Loomis in at the end and send you out on that high note? I think the audience would have left feeling really great.
That was my gripe with Kills as well, is it was fun to see Loomis in the beginning, but too early, and the dialogue didn't really quite, hit for me. So yeah, no, I totally agree.
I just think it's that promise of something more, right? That promise of what comes next. It definitely not as impactful as what Halloween Returns post-credit scene would have been, but and there's some people that still don't know this, but if you go back and watch Halloween 2018 and you watch all the way through the credits, at the very end, after the music is stopped and we're getting towards the end, you hear Michael breathing, and as like a sign that he's still alive and he did not burn in the fire. And I thought that was like a very subtle nod to, yeah, we would like to do more of these. Let's see how much money it makes. The promise of Loomis and the way that it's described just would have been amazing. I think it would have been so well received, and it would have had people jumping at the bit for the next movie, at least the diehards for sure.
I have a hard time believing that the makers of the new Blumhouse trilogy weren't somehow inspired by Halloween Returns, because what we see in Halloween Kills of the moments after Halloween 1's ending, I mean, we got that in Halloween Returns. Now, it played out differently, but we got that flashback moment. Yeah, I mean, the sequel, that's another example of what I mentioned earlier. When you get a thoughtful screenplay written by people who understand the movies, when you understand the stylization and the appeal and the formula and what works and how to do that. When you get someone who just comes in with their own ideas and that's all they want to do, I'm not as big of a fan of that. But when you get someone like the writers of Halloween Returns and Steph Hutchinson and other people who get it, I want to see new ideas from those people.
No, absolutely. I think there's creatives out there that you don't have to search too far for. There was a fan made poster by Barry, the guy who runs Wolfman's Got Nards YouTube channel, and it was like the knife is coming. I'm sure you've seen it somewhere online. The knife is coming down, and instead of it being Halloween, the series, it's Haddonfield. And Dean and I were talking about the different possibilities that you could go with a TV series. And I think in terms of long form storytelling, you need to, it almost needs to be centered around Haddonfield or wherever they are. And again, if you're starting new and you're starting fresh, I don't think you can just have the shape killing, cannon fodder of characters. Then you're getting the Friday the 13th route. I think you need to create new, interesting, intriguing, different protagonists that are relatable and someone that you want to cheer for, whether they have the names of legacy characters or whether they're completely new. Have the audience invest in the people that the story's following, so that when the shape does kill someone in episode 6 of an 8-part series or something, that, hey, that sucks. I really like that character for 5 episodes, instead of, hey, here's Jim. He was in 2 scenes and did nothing. I really do think that's the route they should go with the new series. And I feel like Halloween Returns does that. It's not just legacy characters it leans on. We get new, fresh characters in Halloween Returns. And when reading the script, it made me care about what happened to these guys at the end.
Yeah, that's the hardest, I think, job of any new Halloween sequel. When you're going to introduce a new batch of teenagers, you've got a very short amount of time to endear the youth of Haddonfield, or just the young adults of Haddonfield, to the audience before things start going badly. And sometimes you get like Halloween 4, where you fall in love with those characters like Rachel and Jamie. And sometimes you get like Halloween 5, where we're still arguing over whether Tina was annoying or not. And or you get some of the later films where it didn't work as well. And that's one thing Halloween Returns got right. The younger generation, they were likable, relatable. They had motivations that we could understand, and they were relevant to the story happening of Michael's execution, which is, one of the early centerpieces of that screenplay. There's so much as they develop whatever's next in Halloween. I really hope, even if it's just picking up Taking Shape 2, if they don't want to actually do the research, look backwards at what's almost been, because what a rich now history of unused ideas. I mean, there's a lot to get inspired by, I think, in what hasn't been made.
No, absolutely. Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my question then, which was kind of like what led you down the path to create these books. That they're super intriguing and super informative, and they feature so much that we don't know about. It's great to kind of see them in print. So I kind of always wondered, like, what was the path to get there?
Well, thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
I wanted to write horror movie books after I did my first book in 2014, which was Phantasm Exhumed. And I would have started with Halloween, but in my mind, Halloween was too top shelf. I needed to get a few books under my belt. So I did Phantasm Exhumed. I did a book on Freddy versus Jason. That movie has a pretty crazy development history. I did a book on the Jaws ride. I did another book on Phantasm. And then for my 5th book, I finally thought, okay, I'm ready to do Halloween. I feel like I've gotten here. And my co-writer, Travis Mullins, and I think our goal with Halloween was, if we can't turn up new information, what's the point? Halloween fans are some of the most knowledgeable and invested fans of any franchise, that they know everything. There's nothing that you can immediately turn up that'll surprise them. They've read the Fango magazines. They've read the IMDb trivia pages. They've watched every bonus feature ever included on any physical media release. And so I'm really proud in Taking Shape 1 of the new things we were able to include that fans didn't know, and the people we were able to interview who had never before spoken on the franchise. I mean, that's a really proud feature of the first book.
I was telling a buddy of mine years ago, when you released the first Taking Shape, one of actually his favorite Halloween film is the producer's cut of H6, believe it or not. But he didn't really know the development cycle for that film, and the 6 or 7 years of just absolute hell and nonstop back and forth and getting started, stopping again. It's wild, and for fans, if they don't know, a great reason to go purchase Taking Shape 1. Like the mess that was that movie, starting from when Carpenter's trying to purchase the rights to potentially send Michael up into space, to what it ended up being, which is essentially two kind of different films, one that features Loomis a lot more than the other. It's just a wild development cycle that I think if you're just watching the movies and not reading the behind the scenes stuff, you're missing a ton of rich material there.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the Halloween 6 chapter. We tried really hard to untangle what happened, and what a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And that story really starts several movies earlier, because Halloween 6, if you look in Taking Shape 2, there were several other versions of Halloween 6 that got very close to production. I mean, there was one version of Halloween 6 that actually had a production warehouse and was casting and location scouting. That's how close it got when they finally made the call, hey, you're not starting filming in a few weeks. That's not happening. I mean, it could be a documentary. It really could.
Wow.
It's awesome, Justin. That's great. I know Terry dove into those books as well the other day. Justin also adds, it's a shame Malek said it's a solid script. Unfortunately, it's not what's next for the near future. It'd be great if it was, but ... I'll say this about whenever Halloween creatives go to conventions, and then maybe they get upset about stuff that people speculate or talk about online as rumors. A lot of these creatives show up at these conventions, and the whole loose lips sink ships thing, just because you're not in front of a microphone, if you have a conversation with someone somewhere, it's going to get out, especially today. And it sounds like a lot came from H45, and a lot of it's come true. The Halloween add-on video game, which ended up being Michael Myers added to Fortnite. I know Steph's name was one of those names that was out there in a rumor from stuff that happened from H45. For me, I don't know if there's an area to go back and do Halloween Returns now. And I firmly believe, and maybe you disagree, Dustin, maybe you disagree, Dean, but I think that whatever they're doing next, I would be shocked if it's not a just complete, this is the beginning of this Halloween story. I still think it's going to involve Michael Myers in some way. I just don't see it being a sequel from something that already exists again.
Like I said earlier, I would love to see it play loose with the continuity to where we don't even have to really tell you where it's at. Just watch it and connect what you can and ignore what you can't. That's personally what I would love to see. But if I could respond to what you just spoke a moment ago about the leaks, Halloween has such a weird, huge history of leaks, whether it's work prints or other items. You know, I remember so vividly, it's hilarious to me. In 1998, a month or two after Halloween H2O hit theaters, so we're like September, October, I remember being on the 73 Miles to Haddonfield website message board. This is like GeoCities, if you guys remember the 73 Miles to Haddonfield fan site. And someone posted, hey, I've got the inside scoop on what's going to happen next. That wasn't Michael that got beheaded. That was an ambulance driver, and they switched places. And everyone responded, bullshit. That is such a hard, there's no way that's it. And then flash forward 4 or 5 years, and that was exactly it. Wow. You know, sometimes the truth is leaked and we don't even believe it. I mean, it just gets lost. It gets lost in the noise. And so that's hilarious to me to remember.
Yeah, we've been told bullshit too before in the past from other people. And one of the leaks I hated coming across was Halloween Ends. We're talking like March 2022. And I'm looking at this, document we've been sent, and I'm seeing the Corey Cunningham stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm into it. I like the idea of it. Obviously it played out on screen a little bit different, but I just kind of thought to myself, oh boy, people are not going to be happy. And then the marketing happens, which was, again, this isn't picking on Halloween Ends, but if you go back and you watch the marketing for that movie, it's
misleading.
the final showdown between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. That's how it's marketed. That's a Universal thing, so don't necessarily get mad at David Gordon Green for that and company, but that's a Universal thing to promote it that way, and which I think was the wrong decision to do. I think they probably should have been a little more candid with what they were doing. But yeah, it's crazy how often, I know people will be like, unless it comes from the Hollywood Reporter, it's not true. But I'm sorry, that's just not the way the Halloween franchise has worked at all. And you just gave a fantastic example. I couldn't imagine being on a GeoCities site way back in 1998. By the way, I hated how long those sites took to load. But in reading, oh, well, that wasn't Michael. It was a paramedic driver or whatever. It'd be like, yeah, no, you're full of shit. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's crazy. Leaks do happen, though, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally.
And sometimes the leaks are true, until they're not. The development and even the production of these movies is so fluid and changing that you could say so-and-so's been cast, and that's true up until a certain point, until it's not, and then later on, when that doesn't come to be, someone's like, oh, you were wrong. Well, no, at the time you were right, but we're not privy to the changes that happen, which are constant and always happening. So there's a leak that can be correct now. Things change.
That's what I was going to say, and it's a quote from the movie 21, and that's always account for variable change.
Flick says, Dustin, do you have any actors in mind to play some of the legacy characters? I'll follow that up with this question too. In the reboot trilogy, they used legacy characters, but they're obviously not the identical characters that we know from the original Halloween story. Do you think that they would go a route where Loomis is there? And I mean, Loomis isn't completely different necessarily from how he was in the original trilogy or in the original movies. Obviously, he has a family and he goes through a different kind of hell, a more personal hell in the reboot trilogy. But do you think they would go that route, knowing that it's different people playing the characters and just where they have different outcomes? So, for example, Annie is a witch in the Halloween reboot trilogy, and survives getting her throat slashed and ends up being the one that is in far more of the material than Laurie Strode. That's a massive alteration from the original Halloween story. Would they use legacy characters like that, or do you think they would stay away from that, on top of Flix's question?
Well, I think they're missing an opportunity if you don't cash in on some of those legacy characters, because Laurie and Loomis and other characters, I mean, just the name value alone, they become so iconic and emblematic of the brand that I think there's a lot to tap into there. But to go with what Flick Symmetry said, I don't have any actors in mind. I would hate to say something stupid about who I would cast as, these characters. But my hope is that when they sign these actors to these roles, you get, if not on paper, you get commitments, because this is one way or another. These films are going to keep being made. The TV show could have multiple seasons. Let's not lose a character because the actor got big and blew up and doesn't want to come back, or is just doing this just for a job, right? I mean, let's make sure they understand that if this Halloween's great, your character could come back for 2 or 3 more movies. We'd love for you to come back as well. That kind of continuity is more important to me than having a certain name actor in a role. So that's what I would love to see personally.
Entertainment Wizard says, Dustin, back to the deleted scenes. I've heard there's some material for Halloween 4, but not sure what was filmed versus what wasn't. I heard they filmed Michael killing the cops, but it was cut out. Any knowledge on that? I know the Ultimate Edition of the novel gets into ghost-like Laurie Strode sequence in I believe the prologue of the book.
Yeah, so the Ultimate Edition of Halloween 4 by Nicholas Grabowski, he not only took things that were in the early version of the script that he had to work with, but he also added things that he would like to see to give it his own touch, which were very cool, but not anything that they filmed. So Entertainment Wizard, going off my terrible memory, because I don't have the quick recall of the production stories like I did when I was writing Taking Shape 1 with Travis, I want to say they didn't actually film the police station massacre, but rather just the aftermath. I know Halloween 5 had some pretty significant deleted scenes with the cop deaths, but Halloween 4, I just remember being pretty lean with the deleted scenes. And, I may have to come back and apologize for being wrong about that, but that's my memory.
Well, we would love to have you back for sure. I wouldn't mind tackling Slash of the Titans too. Just got that one. Can't wait to dive into it. Terry says I just purchased the books a couple of days ago, and from a lifetime Halloween fanatic from the same town John Carpenter grew up, I thank you so much for investing the time it took to write these books. I second that.
Thank you for saying so, Terry. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun, and we were really just writing the books that we wanted to read. That's so often the case. That, there at the time, and I guess still, there's really not Halloween books of that kind of comprehensive level. And that's what we were trying to do. Now, maybe in 5-10 years, we'll get a making of book for every movie. Wouldn't that be great? But until then, you've got Taking Shape.
That's awesome. Yeah, I still have to get my hands on both physical copies. So far, I'm getting through the audiobook with Sean for part 2.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been a blast. And again, available on Audible if you prefer the audio version of that. Dustin says you can make something new and fresh while still respecting what has come before it and understanding the lore and taking characters that have previous arc, just subverting expectations.
Absolutely. This guy gets it.
Justin, I'll put your comment on screen. You're a longtime supporter of the channel, but we're not going to dive too far into this. Yep, Steph is working on something for Malik. They said, and Carpenter chimed in and said, I'm not done either. There was a lot of that came from Age 45 that wasn't said in official capacity, but Justin's not the only one saying this. And maybe that's good news, but until anything's officially announced, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I can certainly hope. Certainly hope. I think you're on the right track, Justin. Carpenter still making that cash cow. Hey, he'll put down his video game controller once in a while
to open the envelope with the check in it.
Mm-hmm. You have all sorts of fantastic Carpenter stuff too in that first Taking Shape novel, specifically. That's just so rich and fantastic to dive into, just in terms of his involvement in certain productions. Again, the Halloween 6 thing, I had never even. I don't know how I missed it. I thought it was bullshit when I heard about it, but the whole he wanted to send Michael to space thing, I was just kind of like, wow, this guy's poo-pooed on a lot of the other things, but he wanted to send him.
I have a theory that would, and this is why I would love to have interviewed John for Taking Shape. Of course, he turned us down because there's no way he wants to talk about the sequels, and that's all we wanted to talk about. So that was the most anticipated no ever. But my theory is that he was so negative and resentful of Halloween around the time of Halloween 4 that he wanted to destroy the franchise in terms of what it was at that time. That's why because most people know he supervised a version of Halloween 4 with author Dennis Etchison that turns Michael into like a ghost, and then at the end of it he's like a 12-foot monster. I think John Carpenter, he personally supervised the development of that screenplay. I think John wanted to see Halloween completely turned on its head and, take the first 2 movies and just narratively destroy it. And then 2 films later, you've got John saying he wants to take Michael to space. I think he wanted to do it again. I think he wanted to destroy people's conceptions of what the franchise was because it was getting so pigeonholed, and so was he. He's never been able to shake Halloween. He's not a slasher director. He's a master of horror, but it's stuck on him. And I think at the time he was frustrated and wanting to lash out in that weird way by burning it to the ground and doing something so crazy and new. Now, will he admit to that, or am I right? I don't know, but that's my theory because those ideas are out there.
I do like, again, another one of the quotes from your book is Steph is talking about how there's a lot of people that miss John's intention or what John perceives as evil or falling into evil, where, hey, the more evil you become, the more it strips away your identity. And I feel like there's a lot of people that watch Halloween and don't look at it in that way. And when I heard that, I was just like, it was just because I didn't look at it that way either, to be honest. It was just this mind-opening experience that opens up so many more possibilities, and plays right into the reboot trilogy with Loomis. Because, hey, guess what, people? As a father of 3, something horrible happens to my family and kids, I can't sit here and vouch that I'm not going to go do something stupid or whatever. That's just the way the human mind works. We cling to those close to us. We love our kids endlessly, and he loses his wife, his kid, and maybe it doesn't happen if he doesn't drop a lighter in the cell. But but
what's so devastating about Steph's work, both in his Halloween 3 and the reboot trilogy, is I think most people, in a very simplistic way, would say if Michael kills your wife and kids, he's taken everything from you. And Steph is there to say, oh, no, you've got so much more. You've got your sanity, you've got your sense of self, you've got your past, your soul. And he goes to those places where Michael is going after that. And that is a dark, scary shape. And I think that's what ties into understanding John Carpenter's earliest intentions with the shape. I mean, Steph gets it, even when the rest of us would be content just to see Michael slashing around. You've got writers like Steph who can do so much more.
I'm going to ask the audience now for any final questions for Dustin as we wrap up here. I have one more. Dean has one more. In the not too distant future, we're going to have Dwight Little on the channel. I've been going back and forth with him for a little bit. He recently came out and expressed interest in doing some sort of follow-up to Halloween 4. Halloween 4 happens to be my favorite Halloween movie, and you can call me nuts. I also think it's the best Halloween movie. I just that movie changed the way that I look at horror. He expressed interest in doing a follow-up to that. I would love nothing more than to see the continuation of Jamie Lloyd, Rachel Carruthers. Both performers are still alive and well and available and seemingly have interest in doing it. I guess I just don't think that in today's day and age that necessarily makes the most sense to go and do a TV series off of, or another movie off of, even tying back loosely to that idea of continuing from Halloween 4, however many years later. Do you think there's any way, shape, or form we get a continuation of Halloween 4? It was nice to read about the thought, and apparently he did pitch it to Malek. But I guess I just, call me cynical, I don't see a world where we're going to get a continuation of that story.
I mean, who am I? But I have a hard time seeing the commercial viability and appeal of that idea. As much as I would love to see it, I think that's the kind of Elseworlds story that is perfect for a novel or a comic. I mean, I would love to both see Dwight Little's Halloween 5, but also just a return to that world of like maybe a 20 or 30 something Jamie Lloyd mysteriously reappears in Haddonfield, and you've got to deal with that, following up Halloween 6. I don't know if he means direct sequel, like replace Halloween 5 or return to that storyline. But either way, I think it would be terrific. His sensibilities, Dwight Little's sensibilities on Halloween 4 had such a stabilizing and redefining effect on the franchise. I think I would have loved for him to have come back for Resurrection, because I know they offered it to him and he didn't want to do it. They offered him 5, they offered him 8. His return in any capacity, I think, would be interesting to see.
Hey, a lot of people don't understand that most times when a TV series comes out, rarely is it the same person directing all the episodes. Even Flanagan's most recent one, The Fall of the House of Usher, he doesn't do all the episodes. He is not the director behind every episode in that series. So there is an opportunity here with whatever they do next to bring back some past Halloween directors, if they choose to just do standalone episodes in a series.
Great.
That would be fantastic. Dean, save your question. Let's go to the chat, and then you can finish off with yours, man. Entertainment Wizard says, I know 5 has a lot cut out of it. I don't know if it's true for 4 or not. I heard a Fangoria article has pictures, but it's not been verified.
I think I remember Fangoria having pictures of the aftermath of the police station massacre, which, in the movie we only see a little bit of. And so it was more like, what was the production design of like a dead body and a hand and blood on the wall and strewn papers and messed up desks. I don't remember on them filming a huge sequence or even seeing that in the script. Again, I could be wrong. Dwight Little is obviously going to be the ultimate expert. I'll be tuning in to hear what he has to say about anything. I mean, has he seen the newer movies? What is he, does he regret not returning for 5? What would he do if he returned? All those things. Deleted scenes. That's going to be a great episode.
I'm going to be watching this episode back for questions.
Yeah.
Justin says, Dustin, you're a badass and a hero to the Halloween universe.
Thank you.
What's your opinion on what is next and the route they might go?
Yeah, again, I would love to see, whether it's a TV show or a movie, I would love to not see a hard reboot. I would love to see something that is nebulous and undefined in its relationship to both the timeline and the continuity. So I would love to see something that, doesn't say, okay, watch Halloween 1, 5, and 7. That's all you can do because we're doing that one now, like a sequel to those 3. I would like to see it have references and pick up storylines and be more like the James Bond movies, where maybe sometimes this fits, maybe sometimes that fits. This is going to get weird. There was an episode years ago of the new Batman animated series in the 90s, okay, where these kids were all sitting around telling what their idea of Batman was. And what you got was 3 little mini stories of Batman that were completely different. You had one that was like the 60s Batman, one that was like the Dark Knight Returns, and one that was like Joel Schumacher. I would love to see that for Halloween, where all of the different movie timelines are valid. Maybe they're just from different perspectives, or maybe they're hearsay. Maybe I don't know, but I would love to see them all coalesced into what they do next. You can do maybe something that references H2O, or maybe is set in the Salt Lake City version of Haddonfield, of Halloween 4 and 5. I would love to see that. That's me.
Flick says, thanks, Fandom, for a great show. Dustin, we're lucky to have you both as a fellow fan and creative talent. Thanks for all your work over the years.
Thank you, Flicks.
Dean, close it out here, man. I know you got a big one.
Yeah, it might be kind of vague or, pretty open. You may have heard it before, but I think we're all dying to know. What is your favorite Lost sequel and why?
I've got a crappy answer for this one. Usually the last one that I read. I'm such an easy person to please that I obviously, as I've mentioned, I've gushed about Steph Hutchinson's Lost sequels, but Halloween Returns I think would have been amazing. Some of the early Halloween 4 and 5 screenplays where they did different things with Jamie Lloyd, I think were so fascinating. One of the Halloween 5s that didn't get made turned Loomis into a villain, like where he thought all we can do is kill Jamie Lloyd. So you've got Michael and Loomis with the same intention. They both want to kill a child. I mean, that's bold, and I would have loved to have seen it. So the short answer is whichever script I read last is probably my favorite.
Yeah, that works.
Fair enough. I'll go with this one. This is a softball, but we haven't asked you yet. If the original is your favorite Halloween, and even if it's not, what is your favorite Halloween? And if you remove the original, what would your favorite Halloween be?
Okay, well, Halloween 3, I think, is the second best movie in the franchise. I have a huge soft spot for Halloween H2O, just for nostalgia. But Halloween 6 is a lot of fun, and I love Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And God, you mentioned, Sean, Halloween 4. I mean, that's a class one all the way. It's hard to answer. So that mess of an answer gave you some of my favorites.
My sort of dream cut. I'm not talented enough to do it, but I'd love to see someone go and tackle Halloween H2O. I'm not a fan of the score of that movie at all. Replace the score, please. And for the love of God, stop the 8,700 mask switches that are in the movie.
Yeah.
With all the deep fake technology now, someone should be able to go in and normalize one version of the mask. Yeah, I hate that about H2O. Like, there's so much I love, and the mask switching is rough. I think cutting out the police detective storyline at the last minute was also a huge mistake, because it would have given us the Loomis void that we had. It would have filled that a little bit, and the movie wouldn't have been so short. And bringing in the music from Scream, also a poor choice. But I'm still Team H2O, and I'm going to troll war defend it on social media till I die. I'll be arguing with people about it until I'm dead.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being very generous with your time tonight and with our audience. It was a pleasure talking to you again. It'll be fun to talk to you the next time, which might not be about Halloween, so that'll be interesting. But where can everybody find you at? I know you had mentioned some stuff off the top, but let's go over again. Where can everybody find you at, and what do you got going on?
Yeah, so I run Harker Press. That's my indie book label that I publish my stuff through, and now this year I'm starting to publish other horror movie authors, and you can find us at harkerpress.com, or just put Harker Press into Amazon.
Fantastic, man. Again, all available on Amazon, and I believe you said House of Rejects one is being recorded right now for Audible release, right?
That's right.
Nice.
Can't wait for that. So definitely check out Dustin's work. I hope all of you enjoyed our deep Halloween discussion tonight, whether it's on the potential new material to come from the Halloween franchise or a look back at the lost sequels. We thank Dustin. Dean, thanks for coming out again tonight, man. And don't forget, everybody, have a great weekend. And the Boogeyman is coming.